But really, the reason that we keep doing what we do are the patients and the families that are impacted by this technology. There's Aaron with 2 of his children, David and Susan, Stefan Ross with his children, Martin Welby, VAD number 3 in our program, and he's here in the audience today. Demetrius, Mike Schmidt, of course, June, who got married, and my golfing buddies. And one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this opportunity to plug a very important event, the annual Bruce Rogers Memorial VAD and Transplant Golf Tournament in memory of a patient who unfortunately did not survive his transplant operation. This family has just been incredible. For the last 5 years, they've raised over $55,000 in support of our research. This is going to be the last year of the golf tournament, and I encourage all of you who are golfers to please sign up and do this amazing tribute to Bruce. I want to thank you, the donors who made this program possible, and what can I say? 100 is a great milestone. Thank you very much. We've got some time for some questions from the floor, so Heather and I are here if anyone wants to ask us anything about transplants or VADs. Yes. Right. They're doing a lot of research on pig transplant. The question there was, what about pig hearts for transplantation? The technical term for that is xenotransplantation, and there is a lot of research being done to try and address that. My honest opinion is that the research being done with mechanical hearts is far surpassing the technical and the immunological challenges with xenotransplant, and I think we're going to have a dependable VAD. In fact, I think we actually do have a dependable VAD that will last longer than a pig heart in the foreseeable future.
There's an expression about the pig heart research that's been coined often, which is that it's xenotransplant is right around the corner, and that's where it'll always be, right around the corner. And I think it's what we've learned from xenotransplant is a huge amount of knowledge that we've been able to translate into clinical transplant. There's no doubt it's opened up a lot of avenues in treatment and looking at specific molecules. So it's been a hugely beneficial area of research. But there just really are so many differences between us and pigs, thankfully, that the question is whether or not we'll ever be able to overcome those. And I agree completely with Viv that realistically, when I think about where we're going as a program, our hope really is, and it appears to be being fulfilled, that mechanical hearts will fill that need long before xenotransplant. It's a great question.
Hi, we have microphones here. And so we're going to hand the microphones out to whomever would like to. So if you just point.
I'm not sure whether I understood correctly, but do you find that once the VAD's been implanted, the candidate is in better condition when they go into transplant? And if I understood that correctly, could you explain why?
Sure, that's actually an excellent question. So the question was, how does a VAD make a patient a better transplant candidate? For those of you in the room who have heart failure, you'll know that you have problems retaining fluid, your lung function's not great, your lung pressures are high, your kidney function's not great. Inserting a VAD reverses all of that. We're able to get the fluid off, we're able to get the lung pressures down, we're able to make the kidneys happier. And physiologically, you're much, much better and much stronger to withstand a transplant operation. I'm going to take the liberty of doing something which I like to do, and all of my VAD patients are not shy. Mike Martin, who I showed you today, if he came into this room, everybody would know that Mike was in this room. We have several VAD patients in the audience today, and you'd look around and I bet you couldn't tell who they were. So I'm going to ask everybody who's being supported by a VAD to stand up and be recognized. Another question there in the front?
Could I ask you how your application has, is it applicable to your colleagues over there with children?
So there's a number of VADs that are, because of the evolution of the technology, the devices are smaller and smaller. So when the device technology started, they were so very big and so very bulky that in fact they really were not applicable to the hospital for sick children and all of the kids who have heart failure. But in fact the devices have gotten steadily smaller and smaller, and we can put them in smaller and smaller patients, and we have put the HeartMate 2 in patients from sick kids, and sick kids also has another device technology called the Berlin Heart, and in fact we had some small patients on our side, and so we've put in the Berlin Heart in some small adults, and so there's a great deal of cross-pollination, if you will, on both sides of the street. So unfortunately, as you've seen from the numbers, in fact, the vast majority of patients that we see are probably not going to be able to have a transplant or a mechanical heart as things exist now. And so we recognize that when you've developed a relationship with patients and with patients' families, to say, sorry, you can't have this, and then leave them with no place to go was not the ideal way to provide comprehensive patient-centered care. I did my master's in bioethics a decade ago because I had a great deal of interest in end-of-life care. I watched my own grandmother die from heart failure. And so it became very important to try to establish a program that provided quality care at the end of life. And I think we've done that. We're very integrated with the palliative care service here, and we've done a number of research projects. And the primary goal of our research isn't what I think should be done at end of life. It's what patients are telling me they wish to have done at the end of life. And so again, it's a very patient-centered approach, and we're continuing to do work on that, and we're listening to what our patients are telling us.
So there's a couple things that we'd like to do with the devices going forward. We'd like to have the batteries smaller. All of my VAD patients will agree to that. We'd like the VAD batteries to last longer, but it's a trade-off. So if you want a longer duration of battery support, then you have to have a larger battery. We'd like to eventually make the VADs completely implantable so that they can do swimming and jacuzzis and things like that, which right now they're not able to do. So there is lots of room for development, and all of these technologies are actually available. It's a matter of whether we can make it cost-effective, whether we can make it patient-effective. In other words, is it worth all the additional surgery to make a VAD implantable compared to what they get out of it? So that's where we're going. We're always trying to make a VAD smaller, more durable, and less toxic to the system so that patients can really live a normal life with them.
Is there any way of predicting whether a patient implanted with a VAT device would be able to keep his own heart after treatment with the device?
If I understand you, you're asking me if patients who have a VAD implanted, whether they can keep the VAD?
No, the question is whether you can predict, whether a patient would be able to sort of keep his own heart.
Oh, I see, yes.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous area of research. So the question was, can we predict those patients who are on a VAD will recover their native heart function? Worldwide, the experience is still less than 10%. So for every 100 VADs that are implanted, less than 10 patients will exhibit any type of recovery that would justify taking the VAD out. And several centers, including ours, have looked at it. We actually have an established protocol to examine our VAD patients on a routine basis, and if they do have evidence of recovery, we put them through a lot of tests to see whether or not they would tolerate an explant. For right now, for the current technology, it's really a minority. Having said that, most of you probably know we're a big stem cell and regenerative medicine center, and we hope to use VADs as a technology, as a platform to support patients until we can get cell transplants in, flourishing, do gene therapy, do whatever we can to augment that native function to recover so that we can take the VAD out. And right next.
Is it possible to perform redos over the years?
Redo what?
Like as far as the VAD is concerned, say you have a failure of some sort, can you reimplant?
Yeah, so we have done that. Again, in a program such as ours where we are constrained, unfortunately, by some financial realities, we have to be careful with when we do it and for what indications. But it certainly is possible to replace the VADs when they fail. The newer generation devices are all designed to be replaced in cases of electrical failure. And in terms of transplant, we do a fair number of redo transplants. They're more difficult. They're more stringent criteria that Heather and I have for accepting somebody for a redo transplant, but those operations do occur and do occur successfully.
It's reasonable to put a little bit of context around things, too. When dialysis came out, dialysis was considered to be an incredibly expensive technology, and there was a lot of debate and discussion about the cost effectiveness, and now people don't really think twice about dialysis. Everything in technology tells us that things are going to get smaller and less expensive. We just need to look at computers and mobile phones and the applications. So I think when we think about right now putting in a second or a third device in people, we do worry a little bit about some of those constraints, but moving forward, as devices get more efficient, first of all, there'll be less failures for us to have to worry about. But secondly, I think the devices will become more easily replaced, and the cost, hopefully, of the devices will come down and make that more feasible. In general, we want to do what we need to do right now, and we'll worry about then.
Joe?
Dr. Rao, the Ontario government is going to put $2 million in your program. How long does that go for? Is it 1 year, 2 years, 4 years? And what will that do for your program?
So what Mr. MacArthur is alluding to is the fact that last year the Ontario government finally recognized our program worthy of funding to a limited extent. So up until last year, every one of the VADs that we put in our program were purchased through the generosity of you in the audience, through philanthropy. We approached on multiple occasions the Ministry of Health and said, you know, VAD technology is not experimental, it's not even state-of-the-art, it really is standard of care. CMS, or Medicare in the United States, pays for VADs, both as a bridge to transplant as well as permanent therapy, and the Ontario government quite hasn't got there yet. After basically showing them our results, showing them our patients, the Ontario government said, yes, this is a reality, this is a program that needs to be funded. And to be honest with you, that's exactly what they did 20 years ago with transplants. You know, initially the transplants were funded out of the generosity of donors until it became a proven and reliable therapy. We're getting there with VADs. What will the funding allow us to do? It will allow us to slowly meet the actual demands of our program. So, you know, if you look at most North American programs in transplants, they'll do probably 2 or 3 VADs for every transplant they do. We are a large transplant program. We're going to do between 25 and 30 transplants. So if you do the math, we should be doing 90 VADs a year. We are, you know, we're the largest program in Canada, but we're probably an average-sized program in North America doing, you know, 20 to 25 VADs a year. The bigger programs, such as Columbia and Cleveland Clinic, are 50, 60 VADs a year, doing that 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio. So hopefully, you know, as we get the funding, have the good outcomes, go back to the government saying, the 16 patients you funded last year are all doing great, we want to do 25 this year, they'll up the funding. But for all of you who've gone to the government asking for money, you know how difficult that is.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the informative part of this afternoon's session, and I hope that you found it as enlightening. I think we tend to take a lot of this stuff for granted when you're here with it every day, but it's pretty miraculous at the end of it all. And without your support over the last 10 years since the program started, none of this could have happened, that's for sure. You've put it on the map, the government's sitting up and taking notice, and we're moving forward, which is fantastic. Thank you again, and thank you, Dr. Rao and Dr. Ross, for your time. It's wonderful that you'll take the afternoon and come and be with us. We're just going to take a very short break for 10 minutes to pass out some a little libation so that we can get on with the celebration of the 100th LVAD implant. So if you could just bear with us for a few more minutes, we'll be right back to you. Thank you.